Hey guys, welcome back to Just a Geek in the Garage. Today I want to talk about Snap-on, and is Snap-on still relevant? And what I mean by that is, in this day and age when you can walk into, a Harbor Freight and buy a halfway decent tool when you couldn't 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Is it still relevant when I can go on Amazon and after doing a little bit of research find something that is a simple rebrand that Amazon sells in the truck for 3-4 times as much just because they put their logo on there? Are they still relevant when it seems like they don't really care about quality control as much as they used to? So, this video might, annoy some people, might get some negative comments. Now, one thing I can tell you is if you guys have seen any of my videos in the past and from the picture of the thumbnail, I have a pretty decent sized Snap-on collection. And I've, been using Snap-on for, I'm coming up on 30 years, probably about 26 years or so, something like that. And when I started, I was working on cars as a professional, doing mostly electrical work and things like that on cars. But when I started, back then to me, Craftsman was kind of the gold standard. And to people of a certain age, when you see Craftsman, especially when you see that Craftsman USA, this is what I used to, aspire to. If my entire collection was Craftsman, I was happy. I remember buying this screwdriver. I remember buying my first socket set from Sears and things like that. And I still have them. They're still working. Haven't lost one, haven't broken one. Great tools, right? But when I started working as a tech, and I think that happens a lot even today, is you walk in with a set of Craftsman, or you walk in with something from, Harbor Freight. You basically get laughed at, right? And you're almost shamed into buying Snap-on, right? So back then, I didn't really know much about the tool truck tools. We only had the Snap-on truck that came to us. The guy was great, nothing wrong with the guy, but I didn't have any of the other, Mac or Cornwell or Matco or any of those. He came once a week. He was always there. And, it was, the pressure didn't come from the Snap-on guy. The pressure came from the other techs because, while I'm using a regular screwdriver, I'm seeing them use something like this. And it was almost like it wasn't even a question whether you were going to use Snap-on or not. They only asked you one question. Hey, what color do you want to be? I'm using red Snap-on. I'm using orange Snap-on. You got to pick a color that we're not using so we know what it is. I've always liked green, and that's kind of where, for people asking where green came from, that's really where my green tools started, was the Snap-on truck and with this tool right here. Actually, these two right here. So when I first walked onto the truck and I saw the prices, even for back then, I was flabbergasted, but I was like, you know what? I'm a professional. I got to buy these tools. But I was very selective in what I bought, and I used what was going to be really daily drivers. I was going to use, I had to make this guy for me. He had the long shank on there. It was a Phillips number 2, my most used screwdriver. This thing was my daily driver for many, many years, and I've had this thing probably since 1999, if I had to guess. This came shortly thereafter, although this one has been warranted, so this is a relatively new one, but the one that I got that was just like this was kind of my second purchase, and honestly it was a godsend at the time, and especially when you heard that these gears right here, you knew you were getting some quality, where back then honestly you couldn't really find quality tools, and there was no such thing as going on Amazon and buying tools or anything else like that. It was basically you had Sears, you had Harbor Freight, or you had a tool truck. Granted, I know there's other places, Ace and things like that, but for the most part, those are the 3 places that you got your tools. Harbor Freight, you were laughed at. Craftsman, people talked behind your back if you weren't using the actual Snap-on stuff. So that's where my Snap-on collection started, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have very, very similar stories. So, having said that, and then shortly thereafter came this guy, which is still my daily driver to this day. And this brings me actually to the comment that, one of the comments at least, that sparked this particular video. So I had a commenter, say about this exact tool right here. He's like, hey, I bought that tool because I said this is, my favorite ratcheting screwdriver, and I've had this forever. He bought this thing fairly recently, and he's already had it warranted a couple of times, right? And I'm hearing that from other people of, recent Snap-on stuff, I don't think is as good a quality as it used to be. I don't want to sound like that, old guy, they get off my lawn, they made things better back then. But for some things, I think they actually did. One thing I can tell you is, when I go back and I look, sorry, this thing's a little dirty, but when I go back and look at my old Snap-on tools, right, things like the hard handles or whatever, and it's even more more apparent when you look at a tool that's a direct replacement like this. When I'm looking at this guy and I look at the plastic, it just doesn't feel like it's the same quality like it used to be. I don't know if I can get this on camera or not, but there's a seam that you can see that goes from here to here from manufacturing. That wasn't there on my old one, right? It's not on here on these new ones. But I'm seeing things like shortcuts on quality control. I'm seeing things like, which I've mentioned many times, almost every Snap-on tool I buy, whether it comes directly from the factory, directly from the tool truck, even when they're brand new, they're all dirty, right? There's no attention to detail anymore, yet they're charging me a premium for it. So that's where I'm like, is this still relevant? My wife even asked me, and that was kind of the second spark to this particular video. She's like, hey, you haven't bought a Snap-on tool in a little while. And I was like, yeah, I haven't. And I was thinking about that. And a little while is obviously different time frames to different people. The last thing I bought, I think, was going to be these guys right here and this right here. And prior to this, all my purchases were things that I had placed orders for months before, and it took me the months to get it. And that was on a tool truck. It wasn't even online, right? Where, again, I could have walked into a Harbor Freight and picked up what I needed. But when she asked me that question of, hey, you haven't really bought Snap-on in a while, because she's been seeing me buy things like, Vera, like you're seeing back here, and Vessel, and all these different kinds of tools, but not Snap-on. And I'm like, I don't see a lot of innovation from Snap-on, right? Like, this is, at least to my knowledge, is one of their most recent pair of pliers right here. It's not even made in the USA. It's made in Spain. So this is, probably a product of Bahco. And at least in my opinion, it's not even as nice as the one that they tried to copy that they're selling for literally twice the price. This is $40 and this is $80, right? So in this day and age when we have all this information, we know when I'm buying, a wrench like this, an adjustable wrench from Snap-on, and I'm paying $100 for something like this, where I know I can go on to, Amazon and buy the Bahco version, right? And both made in Spain, probably on the same factory line. Now, I know fit and finish might be a little bit different. People always talk about, oh, well, the metal Snap-on uses is better, etc. I'm going to get to that in a second. But, if I had all these resources for me back when I was a tech and I was buying tools, I 100% probably would have been buying Bahco, right? If I wanted that Snap-on quality, right? I would be buying things like, Williams instead of the Snap-on brand, right? Yes, I like green, but back then when I could barely afford it, I probably wouldn't have cared if it was a black tool or a green tool, okay? Snap-on's roots go very, very far back, right? 1920 is when they launched. Obviously, they changed the game with something like this. This isn't a full set, but just kind of a representative of what they have. But everything has changed, right? The way we buy everything has changed. And, when you're spending your hard-earned money on these tools, I feel like they're kind of failing us as a company. You can say, hey, I'm only going to buy a Snap-on because the Snap-on truck shows up every week. I like my Snap-on guy. I want to support Made in the USA. I support all of that too, right? I'm not sitting here because I do have people in my comments sometimes, hey, why are you spending your money on tools? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that, right? At the end of the day, it's your money. It's my money. We're going to spend it however we want, right? I still went, even though I saw the reviews on this of it not being that great, I still went and spent my own money on this, right? Because I wanted this tool. So why not buy it, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm trying to say is, I think Snap-on needs to kind of step up their game a little bit in a few different ways. I think they need to get better quality control. I think they need to have better innovation because, when we're looking at things, this screwdriver right here, this ratcheting screwdriver, okay, this came out probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. The new one on that you were to go buy right now, spending $100 for something like this, still looks exactly the same. It even has the old logo, like this one. It doesn't even have their new logos like they have on their other soft grips, right? But the quality has gone down from, this particular series, at least from what I've heard online, right? When I got this guy, things about this didn't seem as high quality as the one that I've had 30 years ago. But again, I'm just not seeing a lot of innovation, especially when you're spending as much as you're spending. Do I want to go and spend $200 for a set of Snap-on, right? Made in the USA, great. Again, I'm going to buy made in the USA whenever I can. But, we can look at a company like Klein that has kind of a combination of the two, right? You can get this thing for like $30, or I can buy the Snap-on version for $100, and the Snap-on version isn't even nearly as good, right? Like the Klein, which I've done, videos about this, like it just feels better, it works better. This thing is, it doesn't seem like there's any innovation going on in Snap-on. Now, every once in a while, they do launch a nice viral tool, right? The LN style, great pliers, right? Granted, they were copied very soon thereafter by Icon, where you can get these for a fraction of the price of these. The performance is not really that different, right? I know I'm going to have a lot of people, again, say, hey, I buy Snap-on because the metal they use is better, and I'm always going to buy Snap-on. If that's what you want to do, great, okay? But if you guys are like me, you watch a lot of tool channels, right? One of the reasons I launched this channel is because for the last few years, I've been watching people like, Dena Tools. I've been watching Last Best Tool. I've been watching Torque Test channel, Project Pine Hills, things like that. They all do such a great job with this kind of stuff. My channel is not really technical in any way. It's more towards the DIY or home gamer, stuff like that. So, a lot of professionals that watch my stuff, like, hey, this isn't necessarily for me. And, if you watch me as a professional, great, right? But I launched this channel because I was trying to fill in some information that maybe I wasn't getting from other places, or maybe I'm consolidating information from other places. But when people are sitting there talking about, oh, well, Snap-on, Snap-on, Snap-on. Again, I have a large collection. You can call me a Snap-on fanboy, but I like Harbor Freight just as much, right? There's some people like that. There's some people that are going to stick to their guns and say never and only Snap-on, nothing else. But I'm agnostic when it comes to tool brands. As you can see, I got Craftsman, I got Mac, I got the Snap-on, I got Icon, I got Vessel, I got Vera, right? Any tool brand you can think of, I probably have something from them. If you guys watch my channel and watch some of those other channels, especially Torque Test channel, that's a channel you can't really argue with, right? You may be able to argue, for example, on power tools when they're testing power tools, as far as longevity and things like that, right? But when you're talking about pure numbers speak for themselves. You can't really mess with the numbers. When they're showing a Snap-on power tool that you're spending $1,000 on, that is bigger, bulkier, and less performance than a Milwaukee that can be had for a tenth of the price sometimes, I have a hard time with that, right? Snap-on power tools is one thing I've never gotten into. I've always been something else. Back in my professional days, I'm old school. I was Makita. Then as a home gamer, I went to Ryobi, and now back as kind of a professional, I went to Milwaukee. But speaking of Torque Test channel, again, they've done tests where they took literal testing the metal, see which metal is tougher, right? They took a Snap-on adapter and an Icon adapter, and the Icon adapter won, right? You can't really say much else to that of the metal that they use. I'm glad they use U.S. metal. I'm glad that it employs U.S. Citizens, because I'm happy to pay extra for that. I've always have been, as you can see from my collection in front of me. But when you're taking something like, a Snap-on Flank Drive Plus and saying this is the end-all be-all, yet on that same channel, they showed Mac beating it. They showed Craftsman beating it, right? where this set is $500-600 for, you know, your, I forget what it is, like 10 to 19 millimeter, where something like this is like 50 or $75 for a similar set. Yes, we can talk about skips. Yes, we can talk about all this other kind of stuff, but I'm just trying to get a concept across here of, you know, Snap-on, I think, has just been resting on their laurels for too long, because what innovation has come to this? I mean, I'm pretty sure this one is from almost 20 years ago. I forget what the date stamp is. I want to say the date stamp on this is something like around 2000. I've had these things for a long time, right? Great wrenches, don't get me wrong, right? They've always been kind of the ones I grab for first. But I'm starting to see people come for the throne, and the people coming for their throne are winning. And I think that's, you know, a bit shameful for Snap-on. And again, when they are not even making their own stuff anymore, you know, I showed you these guys right here. These things are $30 on Amazon, right? You walk onto a Snap-on truck, look exactly the same, slap an S on there, charge you $100, right? We have other, you know, which these are, a lot of these I've talked about before, but again, I'm kind of just consolidating information here onto one thing. We got this brand, Boho, I never know how to pronounce it. You can go and buy this on Amazon for, I don't know, 15, 20 bucks. Or I can have it, you know, made in black, put a Snap-on logo, and spend 60 bucks for it, right? One of the craziest ones that I saw recently was I went to go pick this guy up, and I have a video on this one as well, right? Great little tool. Okay, I got it. Has a little, you know, pop out shank. Great little tool, right? I saw it immediately. I'm like, hey, this looks very, very familiar. This is a tool I already had. And guess what? When I got the tool, I found this after I made the video about it. That's your Snap-on part number. And that's who manufactures it. So again, you know, I can go buy this for 30 bucks on Amazon, or I can spend 130 bucks or 150 bucks. I forget how much this is for Snap-on. Yeah, it has the Instinct handle, but is that really worth paying an extra $100 for? So I'm just trying to see if I have any other examples here in front of me. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, I do love Snap-on, and I will continue buying Snap-on. So I may be a hypocrite when it comes to that, because for better or worse, you know, when I came into this industry, it was ingrained in me that Snap-on is the cream of the crop. So now that I can afford to buy tools that maybe I couldn't afford to buy before, I'll buy them, right? Because sometimes you see something that you couldn't afford when you were younger, and you're like, you know what, I can afford that now, and I want it in my collection. So, and sometimes there's a point of pride in there. Now, don't get me wrong, they do innovate sometimes. Like I said, they had their LN pliers. They have these guys, which I thought was a pretty cool concept. It's their diagonal slash flush cuts all in one, so you just have to have one tool. But the pricing for this stuff is just crazy, right? When every single plier you buy is going to be $60 plus, right? Every ratchet is going to be a minimum of $100. Some of them in the $200-300 range. And again, it's the innovation that's killing me, because this, you know, these haven't changed. And some people say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, yes, I can definitely see that. But, you know, when you have companies like, you know, Vera coming out with, you know, things like this that have been out for a while, I would have loved having this when I was doing dash work on cars back in the day, right? And right now when I'm working on, you know, on cars for myself, for my family, something like this comes in handy, right? When it comes to things like, you know, the grip edge type stuff, right? I don't see Snap-on coming out with things like that. You know, Mac has kind of stepped up and is bringing all this stuff to markets. So, you know, I could be wrong. I do a lot of research, you know, when I'm looking at, you know, Snap-on. I'm constantly looking at their new tools that are coming out. I have actually two Snap-on guys. I have one that I used to use, and then a new one for my new business that does it, that actually comes to my location. So I'm constantly talking to them, hey, what's new, what's great, what's coming out? And honestly, there just really isn't that much, at least that excites me. Again, if you're a professional and you're in the bay day in and day out, and you're like, I need the tool truck, I love the warranty, etc., I feel you. Okay. But what drives me crazy is I've gotten stuff warranted on the tool truck fairly recently. And I went in, I gave them the tool. I don't have it on the truck. It took 2 or 3 weeks, right? To me, if I was in a setting where I'm like, you know what, this is the tool that I'm using, I need this tool back immediately, and they would say, hey, it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks, that would be, devastating, right? Unless you have a backup. And what if you are going to have 2 snap-ons, right? You're not going to have 2 snap-ons generally. I mean, some people might. But where, if I have this pair of pliers and I break this somehow, I can literally go and just go to a Harbor Freight that I have, quite a few within, say, a 20-minute range of me that I can drive by, on the way home, on the way to work, on a lunch break, etc. Walk in, and I walk out with a brand new tool. So there's no waiting. Everything's brand new. There's no hassle. So, the point of this video is I'm not telling you don't buy Snap-on, right? If you like Snap-on, go ahead. I bought plenty in my day. And I'll probably still continue to buy Snap-on. I mean, hell, I'm pricing out a cart as we speak. So again, I could be a hypocrite when it comes to all of this kind of stuff. But with certain things, when I think, hey, they're the best of breed when it comes to this, I don't mind going to them and paying for it, because their boxes objectively are very, very nice, very expensive, but very, very nice. But a lot of their tools, like I said, other people are coming for them, right? We got Germany and Japan right here coming for this. And I think there just needs to be more innovation. There needs to be more passion kind of on their part. And the last piece of it, I've read a lot of stories about their franchisees and how they're just not treated as well as you would hope that they are. And franchisees going broke or selling their franchise or just leaving the business altogether because of how corporate treats them. And I think that's just a shame, because a name like Snap-on, still to this day, when I see this name on something, or I see, I walk into a garage and the guy has a Snap-on toolbox, it does give me a little sense of confidence, or more confidence than I would if I walked in and they had maybe a different brand. But is it a false sense of confidence? Probably, because at the end of the day, and I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this know this, it's not about the tool, it's about the person using the tool. And sometimes you can accomplish just as much, with a $1 screwdriver as you can with a $30 or $40 screwdriver. So, please leave your comments down below. Tell me, what do you guys think? Do you feel like Snap-on is starting to slip on you? If Snap-on was a brand new company today, coming out with the quality that they have right now, and it was a name that you didn't necessarily know, would you pay even a fraction of what they're charging for the quality of tool if these were sitting side by side? So again, let's have a conversation in the comments. Let's try to keep it civil, because again, whether you're hardcore Snap-on and you will not buy anything else, or you're like, Harbor Freight's just fine for me, everyone's welcome on this channel. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe.